Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you for meeting today to discuss about the energy transformation, a choice or a necessity. I am Marie-Elisa Garay, the coordinator of the Omani-French Friendship Association. For those of you who may not be familiar with OFA, we are a non-profit organization registered with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and shared by Sheikh Shahin Bawan and supported by the French ambassador, His Excellency Renaud Salins. The aim of the association is to reinforce trade, culture and economic ties between Omani and French communities, mainly through the organization of monthly events. I have to say it is an immense pleasure to see more people attending our events every time. First of all, let me introduce our distinguished guest, His Excellency Salim Al-Aufi, Undersecretary of the Ministry of Oil and Gas. We are honored to have His Excellency supporting OFA's meeting for the second time. Joining His Excellency for today's discussion, we will have the pleasure to listen to Mrs. Marie-Cécile Xanca, Head of Sectorial Coverage, Energy, Natural Resources and Energy Financing of Société Générale, Mr. Nigel Govet, Chief Financial Officer of Rakiza Fund and member of the Senior Investment Committee of SGRF, and Mr. Mohamed Al-Riami, Senior Manager of Oman Society for Petroleum Services, who will moderate the panel. On the name of OFA's board members, we would like to thank our panelists and moderator for accepting the invitation. I also would like to thank our sponsors, Total Oman, and in particular Mr. Ronan Wittrick, Managing Director of Total Oman and board member of OFA, for facilitating the meeting. And as well, NG, PDO, Bank Muscat, and Simtech, Solar MENA. I will hand over now the podium to Sheikh Shahin Bawan, founder and chairperson of Bawan Cybertech and chairperson of OFA. She would like to give a word. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to say that I salute the energy sector. I think you guys have so much energy, You know, always the meetings start at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, where when we request any other sector, they always say, we'll have the event at 10, and mostly in the afternoon or in the evenings. So thank you. We start at 7:30 with so much energy, and you know, we feel that we are free to continue our day and business. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to our event this morning. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency Salim Al-Aufi, Under-Secretary of Ministry, Oil and Gas, for accepting our invitation today. If you recall, Your Excellency, last year we had a wonderful event, and you requested that we should continue these kind of debates, and with your guidance and support, we are here today again. Just to give you a short brief of OFA, it's been 4 years since we started. We've been very successful. We launched several events in different sectors. Some of them are business, some of them are social, whether it's in energy, tourism. You know, we've been very happy with our achievements. We've been growing. We have 62 members, whether they are organizations or individuals. We've created our family, which we are very proud of. The French Embassy, of course, you know, with Your Excellency's guidance, have been supporting us very strongly. So, as usual, I have to always market OFA. So, for those of you who are not yet members, please, I encourage you to join us and become members. I'm very much excited and looking forward to hear the debate. Therefore, I would like to welcome Your Excellency on the stage. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Salim Al-Aufi. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I hope you didn't only come to listen to me. So I will try my level best, and I hope your investment today will have, in the spirit of the discussion we're having with Total, will have a positive return on investment. So before I start, the topic of energy transition in a lot of people's mind, and I have to say, to a large extent in my mind as well, until I started really connecting the dots, reading around, listening to many topics or discussions in this area, it was very much summarized in the things that we see around us and hear about more and more in the environment that we live in. To a large extent, it was pretty much contained within electrification of the transportation sector. A lot of people talk about moving from the traditional kerosene-driven engine to electrical engines or some sort of gas-based energies, whether it's LPG or hydrogen or whatever it is. That's one small sector. And if you try to go beyond it, then you go into sustainable generation of electricity using renewable energies, whether it's solar or wind. And in my mind, it is way beyond that. These are only two small components of the energy transition. It goes way beyond electrifying the transportation sector. And even that sector, we're only limited to the small vehicles and probably some of the trucks. We're not even talking about the big ships or the airline industry. And again, in my mind, it goes way beyond that. It goes way beyond transforming the energy generation from the traditional, whether it's coal or nuclear or gas or diesel, into renewable. I mean, that's also a small sector, a small part of it, and it goes in the right direction, but it's well beyond it. So what I wanted to do, first, before I start, let me just give two disclaimers, maybe three. The first one is that I am not an expert in the energy transition. So what I will be saying are my views based on the things that I read around, things that I hear, try to connect the dots in many areas to see if there is any connection, if there is any link, any trends developing in the little time that I have in the office when I'm not meeting with the like of Ronan or PDO or Shell or the embassies. So that's the first disclaimer. So don't take anything I say and start buying stocks in any company. And if you do, it's at your own risk. The second one is, I know in the timetable it says that I will be taking about 10 minutes. Now, Sheikh Hind gave me a few more minutes, so I will take a little bit more. But actually, I'm going to take a little bit longer than just the 10 minutes that is allotted to me. And hopefully, we can save a little bit of time on the discussion, and so you still leave on time, and we will stay with the promise that we have from the oil and gas. We start early, we finish on time. So that's the second disclaimer. So stay put if you want to have coffee, a little bit of water, so help yourself. And the last one, it's not a disclaimer, this is just giving you a quick outline on the things that I will be talking about. So I will talk about probably three main areas that I think are impacting the energy transition globally. And to me, these are the most fundamental areas that we need to look at every time we discuss energy transition. And anything we do on the energy transition needs to always link back to what impact does it have on the three main. There probably are other pillars, but I will be focusing on these three, simply because I think these are the most critical components, or critical pillars. So let me start with the first one, and it's an obvious one, and everybody probably knows about this. It's really the subject of population growth. So when I looked at the data, the international data, I was just trying to understand where did we come from, where are we heading, how fast or slow, what are the changes. I was shocked to hear that it took humanity almost 2,000 years to get to the first 1 billion human being in this planet. And that's a lot of time. But there was a reason for it, of course. Yeah. That's not the shocking part. That's okay. It took us 2,000 years to get to the first billion is okay. The shocking part is what came after it and where it's going after that. So 2,000 years, billion number one. Who would like to have a guess how long it took for the second billion? And these are public data. This is not something I hide in my back pocket, or 130 years. Yeah, 2,000 years for the first billion, 130 years for the second billion. That is an extreme fast growth of humanity with everything that comes with it, whether it's the food supply, the consumption of land, or just name it. It just doubled in 130 years. And of course, the planet is still big enough for the 2 billion people to sort of probably not even see each other quite a lot. We are today at about 7.7, getting close to 8 billion. And would anyone like to have a guess of how long it took for the last billion, from 6.7 to 7.7? Any number? 11 years. It took 11 years for the last 1 billion. 2,000 years for the first one, another 130 years for the second one, and only 11 years for the last 1 billion. That's amazing. And of course, even though statistics will tell you that the population growth is not growing as much as it used to be, on a percentage term, we're growing at about 1.3%, 1.2%, but it's 1.3% of 7.5 billion. It's not 1.2% of the first 1 billion, or even 2% of the first 1 billion. So even though on a percentage term, we're sort of staying flat and sometimes go down, on absolute terms, we are still growing and growing fast. And if you look forward, depending on which scenario you believe, if we continue on the 1.3%, then of course, just like the oil price, yeah, it keeps diverging as you move forward. And it's anywhere between 11, so they say 10 billion by 2050 to almost 20 billion by 2050. Yeah, anywhere in that space. So actually, the most amazing part is that in our lifetime, in my lifetime, and probably in the lifetime of everybody in this room, we have seen the world increasing at least by 2 billion, if not more. Probably our kids will see this planet if it continues on the extremely aggressive growth, the 20 billion by 2050. Kids born today will probably see the planet doubling in its population within their lifespan. And that is really the crack of the population growth. That's why it matters a lot to understand what's happening. And of course, I'm not going to get into the discussion of is it evenly distributed, is it concentrated in some areas, and so on. So that's the first dimension. And I would like to leave it at that sort of high level because then we go into the weeds, and I'm definitely not an expert in that area. The second one associated with it, it's not so much, okay, we're growing, and it's the point that I've just mentioned, where are we growing and what's happening in the different parts of the world. And again, statistics and a lot of information publicly available will tell you that there's at least 1.5 to 2 billion people who don't have access to continuous supply of energy, whether that is electricity or water or any decent form of energy. That's 2 billion people who are still not getting continuous supply of energy. Can you imagine what happens when they start getting, with today's technology and the evolution of the renewable energy and how cheap it's becoming, they're no longer dependent on gas supplies or accessibility to ports or whatever. They can actually generate their own electricity as close to their homes as possible, or probably on the rooftop of their house in some areas, which means they are now becoming a consumer of energy and of course a consumer of everything else that goes with that energy, and we'll come back and talk about it. That's 2 billion people of today's population. As we continue to grow the population, there will be more and more added. And that's a huge growth. So on one hand, you see the population growing, and of course the demand on energy is growing with it. And again, I will come back and talk about that one because our demand on energy is not linear, like the population growth. Even if we say population is exponential to some degree, the energy requirement is taking a completely different shape. So they will be also added to the total population of wanting to enjoy the energy, the lifestyle that many of us are taking for granted. That is the second dimension, and of course it happens in areas like we all know, probably East Asia, Africa, China to a large extent. Actually on the Chinese part, it's an interesting statistic I heard the other day. The household is becoming smaller, which means the number of people who live in any given house have gone down from the traditional 7 to 8 to, would anyone like to have a guess? Yes, almost 2.7, 2.9 per house. So what that means is that China alone is adding as many households, or have added actually already, as many households as there are in the United States. Just the growth. It's about 150 million households have been added by shrinking the family size. Of course, every house now is just like we do in the oil and gas and many companies. The more you break the companies, the more overhead and the more administration resources that you need. Same thing with households. The smaller the households, the sort of the common denominator in terms of what every household will need to have, no matter whether someone lives in it or not, is still going to consume. So that's another dimension. The third one, again related to human capital growth, is life expectancy. And again, this is no surprise to anybody. We do live longer today than where we were about 100 years ago. So when I looked at the data, again, public available information, about 100 years ago, I was just trying to see what's the average life expectancy almost 100 years ago from today, 100 years back. And it goes like this. The longest, which is probably in some part of Europe and maybe a little bit of Japan, Holland was mentioned, I don't know why Holland specifically, but the longest as an average is about 53 years. The longest life expectancy, of course it varies, some will live longer who are lucky to stay longer, but on average, the life expectancy is about 53 years. That's the longest. Of course, in some parts of Africa, this part of the world, it's much lower. Oman, at that time, according to the statistics, was no more than 30 years. That's our life expectancy almost 100 years ago. Today, if you include again all the global data, the shortest is about 55 years, average. Of course, there are people who live much shorter than that and they die sooner. But on average, in the African continent, and I can't remember which country they cited, they said the shortest life expectancy is about 55 years. The longest is, on average, about 84 to 85 years, and that's in Japan. So we have shifted from 54, 53 being the longest expected to 54, 55 being the shortest expected. So we live longer. Not only we give more birth, we're adding more human beings to the planet, but also those that come into this planet tend to clinch more to it and stay longer, which means our demand on energy from those who are coming and from those who are staying longer, and of course the lifestyle that goes with it, is increasing. Yeah. And that is a huge component of the growth for energy. So on one hand, we need a lot of energy. Anyone tells you that we can switch off the hydrocarbon resources tomorrow and we live happy ever after is not saying the truth. We need it because our demand for energy is continuously growing just from this dimension. Now, of course, there are other dimensions which I will mention in a minute. Yeah. So that's the first part that I will leave you with. And it's food for thought. I'm not making any conclusions. The second one is our favorite of today, technology, digitization, Internet of Things. And with this, and I've seen already a few people actually who are a victim of that. So, question, how many people in this room have a smartphone? Just put your hands up if you have a smartphone. Yeah? You don't have a smartphone, Sliman? Yeah. So everybody with no exception in this room has a smartphone. I got my first smartphone about 15 years ago, something like that. Yeah, so I was, if I'm not mistaken, I was probably 28, 20-something when I got my first smartphone. And it was just because you happen to be working in PDO, well-paid, educated, all that stuff, you get access to technology. Today, our kids who probably go to first grade or second grade, and I'm resisting my 5, 6 years old kid from having access to tablet or phone, they have a smartphone. Far more powerful and advanced than the best phone that I could get my hands on when I first get access to smart devices. Second question, how many in this room got 2 phones? Quite interesting. A lot of people does anyone have 3 phones? I asked this question once when I gave this speech at the Clear Lake University, and there's at least 2 or 3 people who had 3 phones. I didn't ask if anybody has 4 phones, because then I get into a lot of, but there are a lot of people who got at least 2 devices. Actually, if you look at the world trend, and in 2019, and I just looked at Asia and I think it's South America, I'm not sure. The average is anywhere between 200 to 250 smart devices, smartphones, for every 100 per 100 people. So on average, this is again not common, people are okay with having between 2 to 3 phones in some part of the world. Hong Kong is by far the worst. There are about 3 phones per person, if the statistics. I hope no one is carrying 5 phones with him to skew the statistics, but on average it's about 3. In Oman, we used to be somewhere between 30 per 100 10 years ago. We are now about 150 per 100. 150 per 100. So at least in every, let's say, 300 people, there are at least 100 who got 2 phones. UAE is about 250, 220 today. And that is growing. And of course, it goes with wealth as well. Higher GDP per capita, then you get more access to technology and so on. And that is a huge dimension, because I looked at the total number of devices available. Now, of course, I mean, devices live a little bit longer than every year. You don't change them every year. We have about 2.9 billion devices in 2019. 2.9 billion smartphones in 2019. There's still at least 3 to 4 billion people that don't have any. Yeah? So you can imagine when they start getting access to smart devices, what will happen to the revolution of the data that is consumed and generated by these smart devices. How many people have a smartwatch in this room? Smartwatch. It's a little bit less in terms of number because it's just becoming the trend. And so if we compare smart devices, phones, and smartwatches, then we see, of course, smart devices, smartphones are picking up much faster, but then the smartwatches and the other gadgets are catching up very fast, either because it's a fashion or we're getting tired of changing our watches every time we change our msar or tie for those who wear ties. And so having a smart watch is easy. You just one watch and that's it. But they're both getting you more and more connected. And of course, they're consuming a lot of energy in their own right. Not so much the energy that is needed to charge them. And apparently charging all these smart devices doesn't actually cost anything from an energy point of view. Very little. It is not that. The serious challenge with smart devices is the data they generate and what happens to that data. Storing the data, processing the data, exchanging the data. The story I heard the other day, and if I recall it correctly, is that if you record, I think it's 30-second or 50-second video, and post it on YouTube, so 30, 50-second clip, for those of you who are connected to YouTube, and many people are, or Snap, or whatever it is, just post it. Estimate is that, I think it's a week or probably a month, I'm not so sure. That 30-second video consumes enough energy to fuel a refrigerator for a full month. and we don't pay too much attention. It's only a 30-second clip, and it goes out, and that's it. It didn't cost me much. It cost a lot of money to store, goes around, everybody downloads it, send it to the other person, and so on, and so on, and so on. Yeah, the energy it consumes, it's enough to power a refrigerator for almost a month. I think it's a month. I don't want to exaggerate and say a year. But even that is too much. Yeah. And can you imagine how many 30-second videos that we take ourselves? This event alone will probably have few refrigerators powered by the time we finish taking the video clips and the pictures and whatever. And that's the second part. The third one, which is even more serious, and of course more exciting, is the Internet of Things devices. And that's where everybody is heading. Yeah, we do it because it makes a lot of business sense, and we do it because it makes our life more comfortable and accessible and all that stuff. But Internet of Things are adding more and more devices on practically everything that we touch. If you talk to Raoul, you probably want every molecule produced and every barrel drop produced, yeah, somehow measured by a smart device that tells him, yeah, this is how fast it moved from the formation to the wellhead and how fast it got to the terminal. And we're getting there. While engineering, everybody talks about how you can drill wells even smarter, and with more technology than human beings. 2 years ago, I think we had a roundtable discussion. Abdullah, you were with us at the time. Raoul was there. When I said, I can easily see a world where one person drilling few wells from a remote station, nowhere close to the wells, actually managing them and only focusing on the ones that have issues. The rest, the computer is managing, because it has enough devices built in with decision logic that it allows it to do everything else that we're currently doing as human, or we used to do 5-10 years ago as operators or tool pushers or what have you. And 2 years ago, I was in a data center or a control room in Houston where, I don't want to mention the contractor, but they're all now there, are actually doing that even though on a pilot stage. They said, these 2-3 wells that we're currently drilling, we are in Houston and we're not drilling in central Houston. They are all out and we can control them from here. And these guys are the ones that are controlling. And they are young boys and girls, not dressed in the traditional coveralls. You wouldn't think they are drillers in the traditional way that I know drillers. And they are doing all the work because technology allows them to do so. Internet of Things is making a lot of things possible. At the same time, of course, it's pulling a lot of data. Whether we need it or not, if there is something that can be collected, it is collected and stored. Somehow, somewhere, we will figure out how we use it. That process of collecting it, transmitting that data, storing the data, and probably processing and reprocessing that data consumes a lot of energy. And I don't want to get into the what do you call it, the new coins, that bitcoins and what have you, that requires a lot of energy to mine. That's a completely different world. And I think Suleiman probably is in a better position to talk about it than myself. So energy demand from the gadgets that we use, from the technologies and the devices that we are deliberately installing, is exponentially increasing by the minute. The energy we demand for our own comfort, our own life, is also exponentially increasing because of the things that I've mentioned, whether we're more of us on this planet or more are getting access to energy and so on. Both dimensions are actually going only in one way. More energy is needed per capita. I can't remember the percentage growth in energy over the last many years, but it is definitely not following a linear trend. It's more of an exponential trend. So there will be more and more energy needed. That's the second dimension I thought again I will mention. Now let me flip to the completely opposing dimension. So yes, we need more energy, and we all understand why. And of course, there are more probably things that we can talk about that also contribute to the energy demand. The last one is the flip of this. So what does it really mean in terms of potential consequences? And the obvious one, of course, is the environment. And the things that I will talk about is the stuff that is, again, commonly talked about these days, CO2 emission and global warming, climate change, whatever term that you want to put on it. There is, of course, to the environmental change, there are things that are beyond CO2 and beyond just the temperature. The population growth that I've talked about, it's food requirement, it's land requirement, it's for those of us who are not vegetarian, it's the meat that we want to eat and how it's produced and the cost to the environment, not the financial cost of generating that food. And I will not touch that because that's a world in its own right. The stuff that I will briefly mention, just to polarize the discussion, is the CO2 emission and the temperature increase globally. So on average, before the Industrial Revolution started, and I can't remember, it's probably 100 and something years ago, the world global temperature, and of course it goes up and down if you go all the way to the last 4,000, 5,000 years, but just the era that we can sort of relate to, it's about 13 and a half, 13, 14 degrees. That's average. Of course, there are places that are as hot as 50 degrees in Lechwe, other places that are as cold as, I heard, minus 60 in some part of Russia these days. So on average, it's about 14 degrees. But last year, and in 2016, apparently, we have recorded the highest temperature ever. And today, we are at least 1 degree higher than the global average pre-industrial era. 1 degree. Now, a lot of people will say, so what's 1 degree? I just put the thermostat up and I don't even feel a degree. It's a degree on the planet. To warm the planet by 1 degree, you can imagine the amount of destruction that is bringing with it. Because there are parts of the world that will probably be warming up at a much higher than that. And it's really no surprise to anybody that, of course, with higher temperature, seawater is also rising because, of course, we're now melting more ice and what have you. Again, I don't want to get into things that I'm not familiar with at all, but it's just understanding that our contribution to the world temperature increase have gone up to almost 1. Now, of course, the Paris Accord is saying we need to limit it to no more than 1.5 by 2050. We are 1 today. And the expectation is that if we can control our footprint, if we can control our impact, then let's at least keep it at no more than 1.5 degrees. Of course, nobody understands what 1.5 degrees will translate to in terms of environmental consequences. We have an idea today what a 1 degree does. 1.5 degrees, I don't know. 2 degrees, I have absolutely no idea what will happen, but it's definitely a different world than what we have today. And just to put some dimensions to what is 1.5 degree, limiting it to 1.5 degree by 2040 or 2050 means, and can we actually do it? So today, just from a CO2 point of view, not methane that the cows are producing or anything else, just CO2. We are emitting about 35, is it million tons or billion tons? I can't, million tons. In order to go down, whether it's million or billion, the numbers are just too many of them, it escapes me. But the unit is not important. Whatever that is, it's 35. In order to get to 1.5 degrees by 2040, we need to lower that number to no more than 18. So we need to bring our CO2 emission from the 35 to 18 and no more in order to get to 1.5 degrees, which is still higher than what it is today. If we can't, then we're heading in a completely different direction. And everything we've done since, is it 2015, the Paris Accord, or 2016? Can't remember. Yeah, a few years back now. Yeah, 2016. We've gone completely the opposite direction. Yeah, so they, of course, because of all the things that I've mentioned, there is a lot of demand. Now, there is a lot of work happening to try and contain it. And everybody is looking at the oil and gas as though the oil and gas is the only contributor, but of course looking at us to do our part. And we're probably the only group that is extremely active and vocal about it. Yeah, for someone like me to stand up and talk about it, it has a lot of weight as well. So that is a completely opposing dimension to we need more energy. We are getting more and more of us. We need to embrace more technology. That demands more energy. By definition, it will have probably some CO2 emission, and therefore we need to do something to contain it because the environment is not going to sustain our continuous emission of CO2 and our continuous degradation of the environment that we live in. If any of you saw the interview with Warren Buffett, I think he had a documentary, and the example he gave is, if I give you a car today when you just graduate, I give you a car, and I tell you this is the only car you're going to have in your life, the only car, what would you do with it? And everybody, of course, said, I will look after it like nobody's business, maintain it, polish it, drive it carefully. We actually only have one planet. No one to date have proved that we can live anywhere else. And we don't treat it that way. We treat it as though it's going to be available forever. And the reality is, if we don't do anything, yes, maybe it will be available forever, but it will be a completely different kind of planet. Not necessarily the one that we are enjoying today. That's why there is a lot of effort to try and contain the climate change, the environmental impact, and so on. Really, these are the sort of things I thought I will put on the table as food for thought. There is obvious need for growth in energy, whether it's on the population or the urbanization, or what have you. There is also a lot of need for more energy because of digitization, and we need it. And everybody is contributing to that additional demand. But there is an opposing dimension that says you cannot continue to enjoy all this irresponsibly. You have to do something to balance the two. Hence, the challenge that, okay, if we don't contain it, who's going to pay the price? And what would that price be? So, on one hand, everybody needs energy. On the other hand, that energy, if we don't manage it well, and if we don't start to change not only what we generate and how we generate it, but also how we use it and distribute it and so on, then we're going to find ourselves in a place that is probably not very pleasant for a lot of us. Maybe not in my lifetime, even though according to world statistics that Omanis live about 77 on average these days, so maybe I see part of it, but definitely in my kids' time. I know I've taken much longer than the 20 minutes that I said, but I thought it's a topic that is worth sharing. I don't know how Mohammed is going to do the discussion now after that sort of explosion of thoughts, but I didn't want to focus it on only electrification and only renewable energy. I wanted to take a completely different dimension to try and leave you with some thoughts that actually energy transition is way beyond getting electrical car plugged into your house or put a solar panel on your roof. It is far-reaching in many dimensions. And with that, I thank you for your time, patience, and at least I didn't see anybody playing with his phone, so you at least were tentative. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will watch a quick movie for the safety for the event, and then I will welcome Mr. Mohamed Al-Riyami. Thank you.
Welcome to Crown Plaza, Muscat. As part of our commitment to your safety, we would like to take 2 minutes of your time to advise you of our fire life safety procedures. Your meeting today is being hosted in Al Sindbad B. Your meeting room is located on the lobby level of the hotel. Should you hear the fire alarm and evacuation message during your meeting, it will sound like a continuous ring.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? The fire alarm has been activated in the building. The fire alarm has been activated in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
On hearing the evacuation message, we request you immediately vacate the room, proceeding calmly through the fire exit doors, the same doors that you entered the room. Proceed to the right side of the corridor, follow straight, and walk straight until you reach the main entrance double glass door, which is on the left-hand side. 2 doors lie on the left side. You can take any one of them and proceed straight towards the end of the ballroom. Then take a right and proceed to the fire exit doors. Once you are through these doors, continue straight, then turn left and proceed to the hotel fire assembly point, which is located outside the hotel main entrance on the left-hand side. The assembly point is signposted, and on your arrival, a member of our team will escort you to the guest area. Please do not return to the hotel until such time as you are instructed to do so by our team members. Thank you for your time, and should you require anything, please do not hesitate to ask. We wish you a pleasant meeting.
And Your Excellency, can you come and sit with them to discuss about the... Thank you very much.
ضيوفنا الكرام, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bonjour, distinguished guests and subject matter experts. We welcome you in this engagement forum. First of all, I think maybe His Excellency should do the moderation. He did it fantastically, systematically, holistically, and he knows more than what he's letting us to believe, okay? So before I actually sit on the seat, I would like to use the platform that His Excellency actually brought to the table for all of us to hear. And what I would like to do is to create the urgency of what needs to be done. As the subject says, is energy transformation or energy transition, is it a choice? Is it a necessity? I think by end of the discussion, we need to come up with some of the answers to this important question. Now, this being the French event, I think I would like to bring in some French flavor to it. Now, one of the key points that His Excellency talked about was about the temperature. We need to achieve the 1.5 to 2% pathway. It sounds nominal, but the impact is huge, extremely huge. Let me try and explain. If we don't change the course of action, the way we do our business model, the way we engage in our daily life, things will change. I'm sure a lot of you have children and families. Now, just imagine the French Pyrenees, people like to go skiing, okay? If we don't do anything from today, within 30 years, the Pyrenees glacier will melt. This is comments not of Mohamed Riyami, This is comments from the United Nations Davos. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, His Excellency was saying, does anybody know about the population? Rightly correct, from 7.7 to 9 billion by 2040. That's a big strain to our infrastructure in the energy side, and the oil companies are doing something. And really, oil and gas is here to stay for some time because we need to do a mixture of different things, okay? Now, putting another urgency point as well is, who has gone to Miami? Who has gone to Bangkok? Who has gone to Wadi Shab? I'm pretty sure most of the people in this room have gone to Mumbai, to Bangkok. Again, if we don't do anything, these cities, these places will be under the waterline. This is how serious this subject is, okay? I'm an oil person, I'm a gas person, but also we need to be more responsible. And the oil companies, I think, are being more responsible, and we will have an engagement so we can see what we can do in terms of finance. So what we have, if I can just quickly introduce Nigel. Nigel is from Oman International Fund, part of the SGRF, and Nigel, please correct me. I think the IF is ranked number 54 in terms of the sovereign wealth funds in the world, so we have really important person here. And then we have Marie from France, of course. We have to have one French participant as well. I don't think this actually is French, but I never asked him really. And she's from Society Generale, in short form called SOGEN. Now this bank is 155 years old, so I'm pretty sure they know things. So we have energy efficiency, okay, we have renewables, and we have finance. And like His Excellency said, there's no quick fix answer. We need to work all together to find some sort of equation that will work and give us a sustainable solution. So the first question is energy efficiency. Do you think it needs more limelight? Are we doing enough in sustainable pathway? If I can maybe open up the question to Nigel, first of all.
First of all, thank you very much for the invite. Being British, it's nice to be invited to something that's got a French flavour post-Brexit. It shows that we can still collaborate. Maybe it's the first example. I don't think we can ever do enough at the moment. You know, society, and His Excellency made very good points about how demographics are changing, how society's opinions are changing so rapidly. I think that sustainability is becoming more and more important. It's becoming a key word in more and more large corporations. Also in the investment world, it's becoming something that people are starting to place at the core of their investment decision-making process. I think that it's achieving limelight, but I think that it's still achieving the spotlight because it's been shined from the bottom up. You know, there's a huge push on social media and by the youth to say that we want sustainability. And I think that traditional investment houses, traditional energy providers, etc., are still reacting to what society is pushing up from underneath rather than taking the lead. And I think that gap between what society is pushing and where big businesses are moving isn't moving at the same pace. And where it's not moving at the same pace, it means that people are falling at the wayside. And you know, one of the biggest things about energy, I think, moving forward is not just we're getting older, not just that there are more people around, but actually we're using energy in a different way. The technology side that His Excellency talked about is changing how we as humans are actually going to spend our time. We're going to do less time working, and technology is going to take the burden. And so more people are going to be spending more and more time enjoying themselves. Leisure, how do we occupy the times of day that we've got? And that's going to be leisure, that's going to be the consummation of consuming data, that's going to be travel, that's going to be all these things that are just pushing not only the fact that we need more energy, but the type of energy we need is going to change hugely. So from my perspective, I think that it needs more limelight. I think that governments need to do more. I think that regulators need to do more to ensure that it stays at the top of the agenda. But if it doesn't stay at the top of the agenda, then society from the bottom up will force that change quite quickly, because the youth of today are so plugged in and so aware of how they can influence that, you know, they're called smartphones for a reason.
No, I think you said a lot about that. I think I think it's the same trend. Growing, I would say, demand from the investors and I would say from the civil society has forced banks as well to follow, I would say, that trend and to set up, I would say, the standards for sustainable finance. I think it's not new, environmental and social, I would say, risk assessment and monitoring. It started, I would say, 15 years ago when the Equator Principles were set in 2003. That was widely used by project finance institutions and as well, I would say, on the investor side, but more on a voluntary, I would say, aspects. And nowadays, with that pressure, I think with the fact that we are feeling it on our side with higher pollution and changes in our daily life, there is no way back. We have to move to sustainable finance. So it's a new term, but I think everyone has to take that on board.
Cecile, thank you. If I just wanted to add on that, I will park something aside for you to take up in point number 3, which I think Sheikh Salman will correct me and other bankers here. We have something called an ASG rating. So maybe we'll discuss that in point number 3 and how it fits in with the sustainability. Now, if I can just move on to Your Excellency, do you have any comments on whether we're doing enough on the government level?
It's not the government level that worries me. It's the real understanding of what energy efficiency means. And of course, different people, if you talk to them, they will have a completely different understanding and meaning to what energy efficiency really is. So in global terms, similar to the discussion that I wanted to put here when we said energy transition, the common understanding is electrifying the cars, renewable energy, and it's way beyond that. Again, energy efficiency, when we talk about it, it would be, can we consume less for cooling the houses or the offices? And at the same time, the same individual who are doing a lot to try and reduce the energy demand for cooling offices are also doing and advocating completely the opposite action. And that is encouraging even more waste in a completely different direction, different way. And what I have in mind is while we are reducing our energy demand to cool this place, if I can be a board member of PDO, say, okay, PDO is doing a lot to try and reduce its energy demand for cooling the main office building and so on. Its energy demand on the data they acquire is probably far more than the energy saved on cooling the offices. And I have not done the statistics, so I can't speak from knowledge on that one. If we talk about the youth, and Nigel said, well, they are sort of, probably they need to be more educated and so on. While they talk about environmental impact and so on, and they are driving that agenda, they are at the same time are the ones that are generating way more energy demanding sort of actions, whether it's the gadgets they use, the things that they do on a daily basis and so on. So really, the regulator can do so much for things like regulating this building or regulating the high energy consumers and so on. But the regulator alone cannot do anything to the behaviors of the individual. And therefore, a lot is needed in educating everybody, really is. The 5 minutes you spend just glancing on your phone has a huge impact that you probably don't know about. As an engineer, asking the service company to provide you with every piece of information they can get hold of, they can, but the consequences, if you don't actually need it, are huge. Ask for the things that you really need as opposed to just anything you can get hold of. I mean, in my house, I have devices for the temperature, for the of course, intruders, cameras, and security, and I can check from my phone what's happening in my house and so on. Do I really need that information? No. But it's nice. I like it, yeah, just to be in control. Yeah, I like to see once the bell rings, who is it? Not that I won't open the door. 99% of the time, I will still open the door and still answer it. But it's nice to see who is there. From here.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I care if someone is ringing my bell today at home? I'm here and I'm not going to respond. But my phone will tell me someone is ringing. I don't need that information. And I don't think too much about, so what did it actually do? Just getting that piece of information to me that I don't need. And at the same time, I stand here and talk about energy efficiency, and we need to do less, and CO2. Yet, on the other side, I am contributing to even more energy consumption and probably more CO2. I don't know where it comes from. So really, my point is, let's define it and put enough dimensions around energy efficiency so that we don't end up only focusing on changing the bulbs to LEDs and thermostats to 24 degrees, or like the Japanese did, 28 degrees, but go beyond that and say, what are the daily activities that each and every one of us are doing that are contributing negatively to energy efficiency? And we do a lot.
He talked about, actually you talked about how can we use information, data analytics, big data, using this for the common good for society. So for example, one of the key things that happened yesterday in the energy forum with his Dr. Mohammed Rumhi, we talked about energy efficiency, and Raoul was there and Abdul Rahman was there. And in fact, Opal got a takeaway item, which is energy efficiency. So when you look at energy efficiency and trying to map out with all the participants here, where does that take us? Which pathway can we take? And you're getting the nail on the head. Let me try and explain. The first thing is about awareness. It's about campaign. It's about people to know what's there. How do we need to change the way we work? So for example, we'll be looking like, for example, energy audits. I think PDO is doing something maybe on this. I am privy to this information that, for example, I'll just give you a classical example here in Oman. For Ministry of Qaf, a lot of the masjids around Oman, people just come in, put the ACs, and then they just live it. Nobody knows how much energy is going into that. So one of the steps really is to identify, like what you're saying, is to know what's happening in the offices, how much could we save, what's there. So this is some work to do as well, okay? Going back about linking the business of demand, if we take all the batteries of the world, that's how much do you need just to power the city of Tokyo. So going back to mapping to what you were saying about Internet of Things, so you can see the impact, but we don't realize, but it has a big pathway on our thing. So I think it's definitely awareness and doing some campaigns, and I think oil companies, societies need to do more of this engagement. Okay. So now with that, how can we, going back, I'm going to go to, let's say, renewables now, and it doesn't necessarily open for just for the government, for all the companies here. How can we increase our energy mix? This is part of the solution. He's actually talked about the number of gigatons. Okay, so let me try and give another statistics. If you look at the International Energy Agency report, it says all the oil companies, i.e. the big boys, the Seven Sisters, are producing invariably 12 to 15% of the CO2 emissions. And if you to drill that, you get 600 metric tons at the high level. I will not say which companies those are, yeah? Some of the better oil companies go down to 250. But the thing is, what I want to highlight is that they are making a change. Within 10 years, it's going to go half, okay? So bringing in the oil companies, are they part of the solution? Are they part of the problem? In my opinion, and he's actually said it, that we do need to have oil, We need to have gas. And you see a lot of oil companies, they're moving towards gas because it's producing less emissions, 22%, as opposed to the oil around 43 to 45%. Okay. Now, what can we do to bring in, how can I say, foreign direct investments for a more sustainable energy? So I raised that to OIF.
I think the key to bringing in foreign direct investment is you've got to make the environment friendly for foreign direct investment to come in. It doesn't need to be preferential, but it does need to be fair. And I think that you need to ensure that every business case that is presented to foreign direct investment is, matches their investment needs. And this is one of the big contradictions that exist, I think, in the investment world. A lot of companies will say, we've got a sustainable policy for investing that we've added alongside our traditional investing methodology. And I think one area where the investment world is kind of cheating the rest of the world at the moment is the investment space really looking at whether traditional investment techniques and methodology is still valid in today's world? Is the investment return that people are expecting from renewables, from sustainability, is it too high? So we at Rakija at the moment are out raising funds for infrastructure and renewable investment in Oman. And we're trying to promise an 8% return. Is that easily achievable? No. But when someone can go and invest in renewables in Berlin or Paris, and then they have in-country risk like you would see in Oman or in the UAE or something like that, is it right that 8% is the right threshold? And where you perhaps don't get the risk premium that people are accepting, foreign direct investment won't come in because they'll say, as pure asset allocators on a risk-reward basis, they'll say I can get the same reward somewhere else for less risk. So I think the investment environment needs to be right for people to come in. I think that it's critical that all businesses today that have had a traditional core business, whether it's banks, whether it's petrochemicals, whether it's investment houses, they need to be open to understand that they need to broaden their business plan to be able to say, actually, there are other things we can do. If that's renewables when you look at traditional petrol companies, if that's telecoms when you look at banks, because telecom providers are actually encroaching on bank space all the time with things like eFlus, Zain Cash, these types of things. The ability for companies to step back and say, what's our core and will our core exist tomorrow? And if it doesn't, what else can we do? It doesn't mean companies need to disappear, but they do need to pivot and they need to be open to significant change in their business models. Otherwise, they will get taken over by others. They'll get surpassed or become less relevant. And there's also a big push at the moment when you look at foreign direct investment coming in, particularly from the US and various other Western countries where things get a little bit cliched and niche. There's a growing concept of people saying you can have all the government permits you want, but do you have the society's permit to continue? And the moment you lose the society's permit, i.e. the favour of the people to do what you want to do, then it doesn't matter all the other permits you have, people won't take your product, people won't use you. And that kind of conflict between what makes sense for shareholders, where you get your investment return from, and what sustainability does to drag on that historic return is something that at the moment sometimes puts off foreign direct investment. And there are other areas of the world where you can still get the same return for less risk, and pure asset allocators will always go for maximum return with minimum risk.
I think he speaks very well. No, I think on the bank side, what is important is that we are following our clients. We believe that this energy transition is an opportunity. We at SG, we are really taking care of innovation. It's one of our first motto. What does it mean in practice? It means that, yes, sometimes it's difficult to better understand, to spend time. So we are hiring engineers, we have experts, we are doing sometimes advisory for free because it's a new technology, it's new elements that we need to understand. So we cannot charge already, I would say, cost when it's sophisticated, I would say, market. But it's part of, I would say, the game and it's how we need to move on from every single bank, I would say, on planet, because we have to follow that trend and make sure that we can finance this energy transition, which is affecting all industries. I think it's very important. At SG, we are really pioneering and founding members of various initiatives. For example, I was saying the shipping industry with the Poseidon principles, making sure that our clients are better, are more responsible. We are part of these United Nations principles on responsible banking, which is an initiative with 130 banks from 49 countries. So all those initiatives, I encourage all industries, I would say, to be part of these initiatives, because it's where you have all these new ideas, new technologies that can be sought and experienced all together, because everyone brings a brick on that.
I'm not a banker, so...
No, what I was going to do, you're not a banker, but you have some information that I'll try and extract from you, if you allow me to. Maybe if you can look at the Ministry of Oil and Gas Energy, something is going on in Sohar in terms of, I think, Sohar South, and there's some solar development. Maybe you can give us more info for the audience here, like in terms of bringing in FDIs, foreign direct investments, and how we're bringing foreign direct investments and also creating a bit of renewable in the mix.
So the power sector in Oman has been privatized for many years, of course. And recently we are introducing even more foreign owners into the national grid, the distribution companies and so on, in order to bring foreign direct investment into this space. But the actual generation, to a large extent, it's all foreign direct investment. I mean, we as a country or companies, local companies, we own very little direct. In terms of what we're doing on the renewable energy space, I mean, if that's the direction that everybody wants to move, there is, of course, the announcement of the 500 megawatt solar power plant in Ivory. That was, I think, signed last year or early last year. It's ongoing in terms of construction, and hopefully, I think it's next year, if I'm not mistaken, it will be commissioned. Ongoing, of course, is another 1,000 megawatt, 2 different contracts I think it's in Adam, if I'm not mistaken, 400, 600, or 500 megawatts. So in total, within the next 2 years, into the grid, into the national grid, we have at least 1,500 megawatt of electricity added. Now, for the Oman standard, we have a capacity of about 9 million. That's 1.5 million. It's almost 1.5%, almost 2%. Sorry, 20%. That's the renewable energy. The solar. Wind, of course, we commissioned the Thamreit wind plant, but that's a pilot. I think it's about 50 or 90 megawatt. That was the start. We're currently studying the entire southern area on land. And of course, we are now starting the discussion on the offshore as well, in terms of understanding what is the, particularly on the wind, what's the wind speed across a full year. Different seasons, day, night, and so on, so that we can understand where are the best locations for potential new wind farms. We have good ideas, but it's good to be backed by data. Offshore, of course, we also started talking seriously. It was something that we talk about from a distance, but now we are a little bit more vocal in terms of the need to start going offshore for wind farms. For starter, of course, the wind speed is higher, so that concern is less. If anything, we need to probably control the speed as opposed to wait for the wind. Second one is, of course, offshore. You tend to put more bigger turbine, and then of course higher generation. I'm not sure what what's the size today? Is it 10 megawatt per turbine, per pole, something like that? Yeah, which is a lot. So we're doing some work in that space, and hopefully there will be more projects announced for wind farms in this year, probably, if not already, some of it, but more will be coming. But this is on still the traditional ways of moving away from gas or hydrocarbon toward more renewable. Let's talk about the obvious stuff, wind, solar, and so on. But we really need to get beyond this. So what are the consequences of solar plants? The Ibri one is, I don't know how many hectares of land that it's consuming. It's a lot. So is it sustainable to go in that direction? Maybe today, because we're just embarking on it. But 10 years from today, I'm sure a young, wise undersecretary will stand here and say, this is not sustainable anymore because it's consuming way too much, even for Oman. Let's go into the wind, okay? Let's understand the consequences, because those wind turbines are not without consequences. They do have implications on the environment, and I'm sure the environmentalists and the bird watchers will come and attack us. The birds are no longer coming because the turbines are affecting them and what have you, and you go offshore, then the fishermen will come and complain. So we need to look at all of these things as we embark on a new direction. And my message is, whichever options we select, we need to move and move fast, but we need to understand the potential consequences so we address them today and not wait for the fishermen's blocking us or the bird watchers stopping us or the landowners not giving us the permission to put. But there is a lot happening in that space. And it's all foreign direct investment on the renewable. And I think the Ministry of Oil and Gas is probably, it's known to everybody that most, except for PDO oil and PDO gas, 40% of PDO oil and PDO gas, everything else that we do in the oil and gas, it's foreign direct investment. It's not from the government. And we are continuing on that space. And I think it's a model that can be followed and should be followed.
Great. Very good. Excellent. So this, to take the points that came from the panelists, and for the panelists just to look at the subject again, energy transformation, a choice and necessity. What I'm trying to take the discussion through is that it seems that it is a necessity, it's not a choice. Why we are saying this? If you look at the renewables, it's part of the answers, and if you look at some of the OPWP figures, renewables will be at around 3,050 megawatts by 2030. By 2030, it has to be 30% renewables. By 2021, it's going to be 10%. So you can see, on a government level point of view, they are moving this way. So you can see it is actually a necessity. If you look at the demand, with due respect to our growing population here in Oman, currently it's around 6,000 and something megawatts. SMN Power's here, I know, so they will correct me on my figures. And I think 2024 figures is around 9,000. So you can see there's a lot of pressure on us to do the megawatts as well. So you're beginning to answer this, it is a necessity. Now, with this necessity, we need some help. Where do we get the help? From these two wonderful people here. Okay, so maybe to Marie, I'll let you, not so easily can get away today, okay? Let's discuss this ESG for the sake of everybody, basically around, Marie, please correct me, 2003 or 2004, the United Nations, Kofi Annan, had sent a letter to all the banks and the CEO and the CMA market saying that banks need to be more, how can we say, green, okay? So on that, I think the ESG was created. E for environment, S for social, G for government. And based on this, banks were rated. So I'll leave it to you to explain that.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, that's true. That was, I would say, a concern from Kofi Annan, and but that was not really well spread at that time. That was more voluntary aspects, and everything accelerated with the Paris Agreement in 2015, and nowadays it's becoming the norm. and the mainstream. Every single company has to define a corporate social responsibility within its strategy, and to report environmental, social, and governance ratings report or KPI. The growing demand on the investor side and from the civil society has led banks and financial institutions to set standards for this sustainable finance, meaning that we are not considering only financial results or financial, I would say, standards, but also, I would say, environmental and social impacts of the business. At SG, we were one of the pioneers because we have a dedicated, I would say, team looking at ESG for more than 15 years. We have been working closely with the United Nations on that, UNEP-FI, and I wish that all the banks are taking that seriously in order to make sure that we can still finance those companies and not excluding anyone. We cannot exclude, I would say, the oil and gas industry. I mean, we've seen a lot about inclusion or exclusion based on ESG ratings. I think the ESG ratings, you should not be afraid of disclosure, more transparency on your strategy. It's just one way to be better and to make sure that we are onboarding everyone in this sustainable, I would say, journey. So don't be afraid to disclose that. No one is at 100. Everyone has to make progress, even banks, I mean, everyone. So we need everyone. We need to finance everyone, but with these environmental and social aspects taking more importance. Yeah.
Maybe Nigel, you can... Nigel is also part of the board for this Rakiza Fund in Oman, and you do actually some infrastructure project, logistic projects, renewables, so maybe you can just, for the benefit of the participant, explain how this is happening.
Yeah, first of all, can I just say that the topic is so broad when you talk about energy transformation that I can't think of a human endeavor or a way we will live moving forward that won't involve energy. And slightly disagree with you that I still think that energy transformation is a choice, but I think it's a choice that hopefully we make. But there's an impact in that, and as an investor I sit here today hand on heart as a complete hypocrite, because there are great opportunities in the sustainable marketplace where you can get good investment return, but when you build a portfolio you also can't ignore the opportunity that exists for mobile operators today to pivot their business into data providers. And you invest in that space and you say there's great return for people who are pivoting their business and drawing all of this data, because of all the smartphones that exist in this room, most of the time you're using them for data, you're not using them to make telephone calls. And when you do need to communicate with somebody, you send it by WhatsApp. And that's not making any money for the mobile operator, for the provider. They're making money by you drawing data. So as an investor in that space, we're pushing people to say, use data, use data, use data, because we want to make money. But at the same time, we've got this elephant in the room, as we say in the UK, which is if we don't change the way we think, then it's our children and their children that will suffer because of it. But there are so few examples of the human race deciding to take a backward step. And we have to change, and by that I mean, if you think from a technology perspective, when Concorde stopped flying, which was a great French-British collaboration, when Concorde stopped flying, it was one of the first times when human beings said, I'm willing to go slower. I'm willing to take more time. The space shuttle coming offline was an example of saying, we don't want to use a renewable spaceship, we're happy to just let them burn up in space. They're the only two examples of society over the last 2,000 to 3,000 years taking a step backwards. And we have to say, is sustainability a backward step, or is it a sideward step, or is it a change of the way we're going to move forward? Because if it continues to be presented as a backward step, it's so hard to get people to buy into it. Because why, you know, we're called the human race, for example, for a reason. It's a race. We're trying to succeed. We're trying to challenge each other. We're trying to push forward. So this contradiction is so difficult to balance when you're in the investment sphere, because renewable energy is something that's critically important to putting together the whole power piece that we need in the future. And as Rakiza, we look at it and we say, there's definitely a demand. There's definitely a need. There's, without shadow of a doubt, a sustainable platform for the next 30, 40, 50 years where this will become more and more important, and it will replace traditional methods of power generation. Not as fast as most people would like to think, but it will definitely start to replace it. But how do I create an environment where my investors, who sit alongside us, are happy to take a 25-year view of where the world is? Because 25 years is not just a quarter of a century anymore. It's probably 5 or 6 business life cycles. Societe Generale has existed for 150 years, and it's an old company. Facebook has existed for 20 years, and it's an old company. Today, when you're investing, you look at a business, and it may last from startup to maturity to ultimately its business case no longer being relevant in 5 years. That is a whole systematic change in how investors need to look at deploying capital and what they're putting it into. And like I said before, I think that traditional ways of investing, we just put that in our marketing. And alongside it, we say we've also got a sustainable mindset. I don't think the two live together. I think in the end, traditional ways of investing will be the thing that die, and sustainability will only come. But it'll only come when it's presented as a step forward, not a step backwards.
Great. It's actually around 9:30. It's good that we have different kind of like opinions here in the panel as well, because we're in a dilemma. I mean, there's different types of answers, different type of vectors that we can take. If it's okay with the panelists, if we can just open the floor for people to air their views, and we can just debate a little bit. Yeah?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Peter Hamel. I work for Shaliman as well, a board director of OFA. There were a couple of things that were said that were striking me. First thing that was coming was said, with the ESG, we have to finance everybody. Are you financing terrorists? Yeah? So what's the damage that a terrorist organization is doing compared to the damage that a company might do onto the nature, and if you take the integral of the damage? So let me go to this point. Choice or necessity. The energy transformation is a necessity. It is our duty that we will make the energy transformation the best choice for everyone. And this is where I see the banks and the funds and the big corporations in their duty. How are you going to challenge this? How are you going to do that? That it will be the best choice?
Yes, first of all, we are not financing terrorists. That's very clear. No. That was more that we are using now in our assessment, seriously taking consideration about environmental and social aspects. When I mean that, it means that when I'm going to a credit committee, we are speaking just about that. Not about the financials of the company that we are financing, because that's a grant. But it's more about, I would say, whether we want to follow this company, whether the project makes sense for the community, for everyone, whether it is in line with our sector policy. We have defined, I would say, sectors policies. So for example, I would say on the energy side, it's very clear. We would like our clients to have a detection of methane, because that's one of, I would say, the most CO2 emissions. For example, I would say on the energy side. So we have, I would say, several elements. We are advising our clients on those elements, so we are very transparent. This is part of, I would say, the next ways on how we finance those clients. Onboarding a new clients, we are happy to do so, but we are regulated, so we have strict compliance on KYCs, but environmental and social aspects are really, really important these days. And this is, I mean, the decision on, I would say, whether or not we will be, I would say, financing, I would say, those companies, it's more, I would say, consensus. They have to comply with our sectorial policies, like I said, and we have to make sure that they have a positive impact. Positive impact and sustainability, it's very important these days.
I think that, I think, again, you know, we're here to get all things out on the table. I don't think we're ever going to be able to position things where they're to the benefit of all. There's always going to be a consequence to everything that we do. And I think that one of the advantages of the technologies that exist today is there's a better match between project requirements and the capital pools that are funding them. So it's no point, in my opinion, when you look at a 20-year project, one mistake that I've seen made in a number of investment cases is that the first thing that's happened is you've put a 5-year piece of debt in right at the start and you're taking refinancing risk. Today, because of the way that businesses interact and investment houses interact with businesses, there's a far better match between the life cycle of the investment and the life cycle of the capital that's supporting it, and that's hugely important. But I think that also we have to make sure that we're realistic about what can be done on day one. Today, I think that in the world, when you talk about sustainability and ESG funds, most of them will say, if you look at it like a hurdle race, most of them will say the first hurdle is financial return. I've got to get my financial return. Once I've got over that hurdle, does it have good corporate governance? I'll get over that hurdle. Is it doing something good for society? Yeah, I'll get over that hurdle. And is it sustainable? Yeah, I'll get over that hurdle. There's very, very few organizations, unless they're truly philanthropic or benevolent, that say my first hurdle is sustainability. And then after that, I'll take financial return, whatever that may be. So there's a change in the concept and the matching that needs to happen between projects that have got a need for long-term capital, and that long-term capital being available is bridging. The gap between them is bridging, but it still exists. And I think that what we need to do as a fund like Rakiza is we need to look at projects that fit within the life cycle of our fund and say, yes, we can fund and support that. But it's no sense for us supporting a 25-year project when we're a 12-year fund and placing refinancing risk into a project that may be at an actual critical phase in 12 years' time. It's great for us short term. It's probably great for the management of the project short term because they say, hey, look, we've got funding, we've got it done. But all you're doing is kicking the can down the road for a problem that may exist at another time in the life cycle. So I think that there's a part to be played in making sure that the communication between capital coming in and the project is completely transparent from the start.
Assalamu alaikum. First, I'm really happy. My name is Sihan Bentouati. I'm from Nafas International. So I'm very happy that the first question was about energy efficiency, because I strongly believe that any sustainability journeys have to start with improving efficiency. However, I think it would be better if we take it to resource efficiency rather than just energy, because it's a nexus, and energy, water, you can add so many other things, are extremely linked. So if we have a great energy efficiency, but we don't, for example, pay attention to water, then we are leaving one part of the equation. So I think it's very important just to focus on a nexus approach and looking at it from a resource efficiency point of view. So if you work, for example, on energy, you're saving water because you're using less water for cooling. Same thing if you have great energy efficiency, but your water, you have leaks everywhere, using 5 times more water for your shower than you need. And water requires energy for storage, for transport, for purification. So it's important that we look at it in a nexus context. And I was in an event, United Nations event last week in Jordan, and they were talking about access to finance also. And this nexus approach that we look at resources together in an integrated approach was one of the elements that is very important for access to finance. So I think it's important that we think of resource as a whole rather than just one item in isolation. I just look forward to your comments.
Siam, thank you very much. That's a very excellent question, and hopefully Marie will support me. If I can just bring some, how can I say, paperwork on the table. Of course, like Ministry of Environment here in Oman, I don't mean to talk about them on their environment, but I know that they are contributing 2%, in this national contribution of this 17 items of the United Nations. So I think most companies, if you look at Total, they are, I'm going to answer it to you in a sort of like in a holistic way. If you look at Total here, Koronan, please correct me, if you look at their P&L account and if you look at their report, they are committed partly to these points as well. So on a company point of view, they are, and they're looking at the environment, the people, the human rights, and His Excellency sitting beside me, it's not just about certain vectors, it's the whole part. So you said it correctly, it's to do with the water, it's to do with the people, it's to do with the poverty. So I think companies, governments are doing this kind of considerations, shall we say, and this is clearly stated in our contribution here in Oman as well. Yeah? Cecile, did you want to add?
No, yes. I think, yes, the famous SDGs of the United Nations are really the ones. I mean, when we're looking at sustainability, for example, I would say in finance, we're looking at all those elements. And we much favor the integrated approach. We believe that it's not just, I would say, one piece that will make, I would say, the puzzle. It's more an integrated approach. So we favor, I would say, cross industries projects, and on our side, when we have to finance those projects, we are creating bespoke teams with one people from the infrastructure, because we haven't spoke about infrastructure, but infrastructure is key to be financed in order to make sure that we can have this efficiency, we can, I would say, have this increase of energy demand well served to every consumers, but in an efficient way.
I have just one question. Any focus towards waste to energy or other alternative resources for the energy which is also required for sustainability? Thank you.
The two projects that I didn't mention, just skip my mind. There's about 150 megawatt currently on the making waste to energy project that BIA is spearheading together with OPWP. So they're trying as much as possible to collect all the waste, and instead of sending the waste to the traditional dump, they're actually converted to energy. And we think it can sustainably generate about 150 megawatts. So the more waste you make, the more power we can generate. I'm not saying make more waste, but at least they are trying to consume it in a more sustainable fashion, more environmentally concerned or responsible. That's one. The other one is, and I think the work is currently done by PDU. I've seen the first pass, and I think there's still a little bit more work required, is we are traditionally oil and gas companies. We've drilled thousands of wells. I don't know what are the total number of wells that PDU drilled. The active wells are in the thousands. So what PDU is doing now for the country, not for PDU only, is to understand the geothermal potential of all the different wells, and understanding where are enough geothermal potential pockets that using today's technology and maybe tomorrow's technology will allow us to start generating sustainable energy. As you know, geothermal will continue. Yeah? So it's not a day-night thing. It's not a resource that will be exploited. It is something that we can actually comfortably say this is a sustainable generation of energy. Of course, we need to understand what are the potential consequences. So that's another area beside the traditional solar, wind, onshore and offshore, There is, of course, the waste to energy, and there is the geothermal potential. And these are the things that are currently known. I'm sure there are things that will probably come in the future that today we're not even thinking about.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sausan from the German Industry and Commerce Office. And I have a question for you, Your Excellency, about the spot market. Could you explain to me to whom it is applicable and how it will increase FDIs in the renewable sector?
The electricity spot market?
Yeah, the electricity spot market.
It's really to the generators. That's where it's heading. The idea is that existing contracts will continue on the current terms and conditions of the existing contract. But there will come a time when the contract expires. And at the expiry date of the existing contracts, then a portion of their generation, and the position has not been decided, but a portion of their generation will be on long-term purchase agreement so that we can secure the baseline. But a bigger portion of their generation will go into spot market, and spot market will allow them to compete with other generators. So you try and, number one, of course, you bring the cost down as much as possible, but also improve the efficiency of the generators so they compete, not in terms of cutting costs, but also in becoming more efficient to generate electricity, to generate power. And it will be generated in packages, so the first package at a price, and then the second package, and so on, until the total demand allotted by the distribution center is consumed, or you reach it. So the future generators will likely to go into spot immediately. At least that's my understanding until today. We haven't really finalized that discussion. That's, of course, will help also the renewable energy, because now, with the work that we're doing on ensuring that the regulation around wheeling is in place, it allows companies to generate electricity, renewable energy in one place, and hopefully have a direct contract with a customer, or maybe straight into the spot market completely somewhere else. Where today that is not possible, not because physically it's not possible, just a regulator. And that allows, PDO can produce electricity, and if they're not using it, they can easily export that, and the wheeling regulation will allow them to sell it to Carrefour or Total or whoever else wants it. That's one way, or at least put it on the spot market and see if they can compete with the traditional generators, especially if it is excess power. And it's aimed to help the final customer get electricity as cheap as possible, and of course without harming the generators. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, is it 21 or 22 we're starting? No, not this year. This year we're probably finalizing, but maybe from next year we will start piloting the spot market. And on that one, of course, we are in an uncharted territory as far as this region is concerned. No one else is there. So we're going to be the first comer into the electricity spot market space. But that's how it's at least explained to me how it works.
First of all, I would like to thank the four panelists for being with us. Thank you, Your Excellency, especially for being with us for the second time. For the second time, you allow our association to shine. And I think that Hin and I are very grateful for your participation. You might come back again, by the way. Two remarks and one little announcement. First of all, I find it very comforting to see that, for example, in this room today, two major oil and gas companies are taking part and presenting efforts about this energy transformation. When you think about it, it was not a given 15 or 20 years ago. If you remember very well, 15 or 20 years ago, most economists were telling us that we would end up on bikes and that the oil was coming to an end. I've seen it. I've seen this evolution myself. Since then, oil has been found everywhere around the world. So we could be in a situation where most oil and gas companies would say, look, there is oil everywhere. We didn't know it, but it's everywhere. So why don't we take all these efforts? Let's just drill and drill and drill and take it. But no, they are at the forefront of this reflection on energy transformation. Maybe because they know the subject more than anyone. And I think that aspect is already quite comforting. The second remark, I was listening very carefully, Mr. Undersecretary, what you were saying about the very rapid growth of the number of people who live on this planet. But it's not only that, there is another trend, which is that more and more of those people live in cities. And this is being seen everywhere. Even in Oman, I don't have the exact figures, but I think that more than 70% of the population of Oman lives in the strip, the urban strip between Muscat and Sohar. You look at a country like Iran, which may have the romantic image of a rural country, but 85% of the people in Iran live in cities. And this is a trend that we see everywhere. And people might think that living in cities actually divides the energy consumption, but it's exactly the opposite that happens, because cities consume a lot of energy. And they consume energy even at night when people sleep. And this is where I get to my little announcement. We will organize, in the framework of the French Week next month, on the 12th of March, symposium on sustainable cities here in this hotel, with the participation of at least 10 French companies and Omani companies too. Because I believe it's becoming an interesting subject which also combines technology and reflection about the future. So I hope you will accompany us again in this endeavor, and of course, Your Excellency, you're welcome again. Thank you.
I want to thank you for hosting this event and bringing minds together. My hope is that everyone will take away several points to drive this further in Oman. I'm Dr. Deborah Enzenbacher from Sultan Qaboos University, and I see it, all praise be upon our recently departed Sultan. I want to raise his name because we at the university have a mission to drive forward all of his legacy and his vision. So I have a couple remarks and then a question, and I'll be as quick as I can. Firstly, I want to say that what we need is to learn lessons from places where this is all working. And there are places in the world where efforts have been made and we can drive this further and faster, benefiting from that effort from other people and how we can adapt it in Oman. Second point is that we need to attach conditions to the loans we give to projects, to organizations, to the approval process, and we need to raise the targets and the standards. That's what we need to do, and that's what we can all actively do to drive that pressure. Thirdly is that the language is changing. As consumers and individuals are taking empowerment for themselves, they're introducing words like flight shaming. And I'm raising the concept of flight shaming that I'm teaching my students in tourism management at the university. As a geographer, I'm looking at global trends and demographics like you've pointed out so well. Thank you for that. Flight shaming may soon be coming to banks and corporations. Just watch out for it. The concept of shaming. And you talked about disclosure and transparency. It's coming, so thank you for those comments. I also want to just tell you one little quick thing that happened to me 2 weeks ago when we started our new semester. My first male Omani student came to my office and said, Dr. Deborah, I just want to tell you, since you taught us about climate change last year, I have become a vegan. Wow, that was big for me. A male Omani giving up meat. He said he's becoming a vegan because he's concerned about climate change. So take heart with that. My last point is about drawing your attention to the Energy Transitions Commission's work. So I want you to know that there are other people around the world that are committed to transforming and transitioning into more sustainable forms of energy. And so you may want to look up their work online. So my question is, of course I'm an academic, I have questions. Is there a stakeholder group, including the government, that is working on energy transition in Oman? And if not, should there be one? How might it be formed? Who would be on it? And why? And good luck.
People who attended the roundtable discussion yesterday are in better position to answer. Have you? No, you were there. But yes, there is. It is at the moment sort of championed by the Ministry of Oil and Gas, Ministry of Energy, whatever you call us. And it has members from the Ministry of Education, Higher Education, Environment. I think Supreme Planning Council, they do come and go, but they definitely have a role. And they're looking into the energy transition, not in terms of, as I mentioned, just more solars and more electrification, but also what does it mean in terms of the next generation of workers that we need? How does fourth industrial revolution impact them, and so on and so forth. So there is a forum. I'm not sure where that document normally goes beyond its first distribution, but they do look at the actions that were generated from the last discussion, and some companies tend to progress. And we do have, of course, I think SQU is also a member of that. Dr. Ali Behmani tends to attend. I'm not sure if he was there yesterday or not. German university tend to attend, at least the one I attended, they were there, and they do have actions. So yes, there is a forum, but it's not a government body as in it's a Ministry of Energy Transition, but there is, of course, a Ministry of Climate Affairs and Environment.
Yeah. If I can just add comments to His Excellency, I was actually at that particular forum with Abdul Rahman. Raoul was also there, if Raoul would allow me to talk. Yeah. With your acceptance, what I will highlight is basically what were the top 10 recommendations for the industry. I won't talk for the government, and what were the top 5 sort of like takeaways. Can I do that, Deborah? So to answer your question, that there was, through Gulf Intelligence, we basically take, for example, Occidental, we take PDO, we take Total, we take ENI, we take Sohar University, there was somebody from SQU University there, OPAL, where I work for, was also there. And we debate these things very passionately, and then basically, Sean basically gives us a bit of a switch, and we vote. So you have so basically you have industry, government, academia, and it's basically about 40 to 50 people, and we get to have a flavor of some of the things that need to be taken. Again, like what His Excellency is saying, it doesn't mean this will be solid as the Bible or the Quran, but at least it puts us in the right direction. So if I can give you the top 10 and the top 5. So the top 10 industry that were discussed yesterday, based on the questions and the workshops that we had also in November: decarbonizing the power market, development of the hydrogen, which JUTEC is doing, green energy. Again, and that's why I put it there, energy efficiency, okay, immediately. Grow low Oman's low carbon SME focus, build investor confidence, spur innovations, i.e. technology and things like that as well, low carbon and employment, ensure energy infrastructure by 2025, leverage international oil groups, okay, and build, like what you were saying, build digital awareness. And for example, PDO will champion the grow low carbon chain, okay? And OPAL is basically doing about energy efficiency. Now, then what we had was like another 5 based on the voting, okay? So it was basically energy efficiency, increased investor confidence in low carbon projects, accelerate the removal of subsidies in the power sector, and increase investments in renewables. So I hope, Dr. Professor Deborah, that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the one point what you've raised earlier, which is can we learn from places where it has worked? And the answer is yes. We are in some areas definitely looking at where did it work and can we localize it. Of course, we can just copy it and dump it here. And two main examples, well, three actually. The first one is appliances regulation. Ministry of Commerce and Industry is currently working on standards for appliances that are allowed to come to the country. I think they're starting with ACs, so now they are a standard, and you will see on the AC, similar to what we see on cars, how efficient that particular device is. And of course, certain threshold will not be allowed to come into the country. They're working on washing machines, refrigerators, and so on. So there is a group that is working on that and taking standards from other parts of the world where it did work. We are in discussion with Japan on the Energy Conservation Center as a concept to see if there is something that can be replicated locally to look at all the different issues related to energy conservation and pull them all together, not a regulator, but a generator of ideas that then the regulators can take and hopefully implement in the policymaker. And the last one is just very recent. In fact, the announcement that, and I can't remember the city in the UK, they started introducing up to 5% of hydrogen into the gas stream that goes into the power plant and then also the appliances at homes. Now, we don't have gas going to the individual houses, so our problem is much easier. Just go to the power plant, and we're currently seriously looking into generating green hydrogen and injecting that into the gas grid to certain power plants that are in controlled sort of environment. And I think there is an area that we definitely will be able to capture, again, learning from examples where it worked. Of course, and of course, we are in continuous sort of scout for ideas, but it needs to be localized before we can implement it. But yes, we are. I think it's a very interesting topic, and a lot has been said already in this area, and I think more will be said. But what I wanted to do is just polarize the discussion so you kind of walk away with some, not necessarily answers, whether it's necessary to make that transition or it's a choice, but it's for you to decide, for you to answer that question. But it's really understanding the broader context of the energy transition beyond the traditional understanding. Of course, it goes without saying that without investment in the transition, nothing will happen, and therefore the need for more aggressive investment. And I was hoping that we get a declaration here that banks will dedicate 10-15% of their net profit toward sustainable energy transition projects without looking for return on that investment. But we didn't get there. Maybe at the next session we will advocate for something, because I think it's important that we all chip in, not only the oil and gas companies, and of course it's important for their business because they're looking into 100 years from today, what would the world look like, and can we as a company continue to exist in that space where oil is not necessarily the flavor of everybody, but something else, and we like to be part of that space. But also the banks looking into that 100-year plan and say, what do we need to chip in with today in order to create that environment that will make us more profitable, more sustainable in the future. Otherwise, if we continue the traditional way of only relying on the business community to spearhead the research and development and technologies innovation, then a part of the society is not contributing. And the last one is education, education, education. So thank you for being with us. But a lot can be done if we start with the young generation understanding the future consequences, but their today's action toward that future state. And I think we are not doing a lot in that area because a lot of them are still not appreciating. Of course, they look at us and say, we want to enjoy the same life that you've enjoyed, and I don't blame them for that, but they have a responsibility going forward that probably I was not aware of when I was young, or did not have the same footprint that they're currently having today. And therefore education, it starts with us. So when I say education, I don't mean the schools and the universities, I mean us as parents. Because what we can teach at home, the school will not be able to do. So it starts at home. So if you are one of those that give your 6 or 7-year-old boy or girl a tablet, start from today to say no. And I think my young kid now learned that there is something called vitamin N, and it took him some time to understand it, that actually it's the word no to a lot of things that he asked for. So with that, I really would like to thank you, Sheikh Hind and Your Excellency, for inviting me again. Again, to what I said earlier, I hope the return on investment for your time today with us was worth it, and it's higher than the 30% Totalis keep asking for. But I definitely enjoyed it, and thank you very much for the announcement of the 12th of March. I will try and pencil that in, but we'll see how, and I will talk to Ron and of course going forward. So with that, from my side, I would like to thank you, and thank you for the questions as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your sharing your views, and to all of you for this inspiring talk. Just to repeat, as our chairperson said, if you want to join OFA, you are most welcome. We have also some sponsors' documents outside next to the network coffee, so please take some information from them. We wait for you for the French week, obviously, and I think we are done. Thank you.